Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you. All right. Can everybody see that? Yes. Awesome. Well, welcome, everyone, to my new masterclass. This one is called From Triggered to Teammates, 4 simple steps to move from being triggered to being connected team in your relationship without resentment. That's a lot. It's a lot to put on us, but if you're here today, I'm guessing that you have experienced being triggered before. And go ahead and get started. I love this image. Like, we have so much love for our partners, so much love to give, and yet sometimes it's so freaking challenging, right? So let's take a moment to find out who's here right now and what your relationship status looks like, however you want to define it, if you're open to sharing. And again, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. This is all consent-based. So in the chat, if you want to drop what definition best fits you. Are you number 1, we're dating? Are you number 2, we're engaged? Number 3, we're married? Number 4, it's complicated? Number 5, you're just after the 5-year mark? Number 6, it's been more than 10 years? Or number 7, it's been more than 20 years? Oh my gosh, 13 years today. Congratulations. 30 years. Holy cow, we need a number 8. Engaged in the past 5 years, and you just passed the 5-year mark. It's been 7 years together. Oh my gosh. I love this. I love this. Congratulations. So much going on. Okay, so if you are familiar with my work at all, you will know that I love to breathe and I love to bring people back to their breath. I do a lot of work with the body and somatics. And so let's go ahead and receive a breath together. Go ahead and inhale. And exhale. And this next one, we're going to inhale, but on the exhale, make a little sound in your throat. Go ahead and try it together, like a sigh. Inhale. And exhale. Beautiful. We're going to do it one more time in a moment, but let me tell you why we're doing that. We're doing that because when we take those big sighs, it tells our vagus nerve that we're safe. We wouldn't be making that sighing sound if we were not safe. And so it kind of gives a little trick, a little boost to your nervous system of letting you know, hey, we're safe. Even though we're in a new environment, even though we're here to learn, even though this might be a challenging or scary topic for some people, we're safe. So go ahead and receive one more breath. And on the exhale, go ahead and sigh. Deep inhale. And exhale. Beautiful. And if you're not muted, go ahead and mute, and you can unmute later on when we ask you some questions. And we'll use the chat a lot today too. So my intention for this masterclass today is to show you that the best way to truly feel like you're on the same team, even when triggers arise, is to relearn love. We're going to talk a lot about that today. But before we do, let me tell you a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know, my name is Ari, like Barry, Cherry, Mary, Barry. I'm Ari Kardosh. And I've been a relationship expert for over a decade, owning my own company, doing this kind of work for several decades. This has been a huge piece of my life. My parents taught marriage classes and still teach marriage classes in their church. So I grew up with a lot of amazing models around me and a real passion for how people connect. I used to do leadership development at Amazon.com for about 5 years. And while I was there, I started working with my executives and learning that most of them were feeling really lonely at home. So whether they were in a relationship and their marriages were falling apart, or they were single and they really were feeling lonely and they wanted to be in a relationship, we worked on that with their consent. And they would come to work feeling so much more connected to themselves and energized, and they'd have so much more focus and clarity, and it would rub off on the team. And I saw entire organizations change when I focused more on what was happening in the heart and in the bedroom than when I did what was happening in the boardroom. And I loved it. I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do forever. I'm going to leave Amazon and do this. So I left Amazon, wrote a best-selling book called Relationship Agreements, and have spoken and taught all over the world on this topic, including companies like Amazon and Microsoft, and I have taught at universities like MIT. So, and even my husband and I have a chapter in one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, The Miracle of Love. So we're really passionate about this work. This is especially my calling. So let me start with this. I love this. People ask me like, you're a relationship coach, you know all the tools, so you never get triggered, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we still get triggered. We're human. We're human. And I'll talk more about how triggers arise. But let me just say that Jamin, my husband is named Jamin Patel, and he's amazing. We've been together for well over 9 years, and we get married every year. We try to have a very conscious relationship. So we are always looking at how we invest in ourselves and are we choosing each other from a really strong and solid place. And so each year we ask each other, do we want to get remarried? Do we want to recommit? And we do. And one year it was not an easy choice. And we ended up doing a relationship death ritual and having to start something all over again and create something fresh, not all over. I'd say something fresh and new, because the old version of our relationship wasn't working. So we've been through a lot together, and 2 kids. We have 2 amazing children now, ages almost 7 and 8. So it's been quite the journey. And we do get triggered. When we first got together, we thought we were like the same person in different bodies. And then over many years, we learned that we're pretty much opposites, complete opposites. And we really trigger the heck out of each other very easily. And we have a pattern around that. If you are not muted, if you could click mute, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. And we found that the ways we trigger each other, there was a pattern. Yeah, it was a very clear pattern. And usually it was Jamin got triggered by something I was doing, and then he would have a big emotional reaction. And then I would get triggered by him having an emotional reaction, and I would have a huge emotional reaction. And it just never worked out. And we tried so many things. And it hit the point where someone said this to us, something similar to this. They said, if you can't fight in front of your kids and feel proud of it, then you don't know how to fight. I was like, oh yeah, that's ouch, ouch. And I think back to how fighting was modeled in my family or handled in my family. And I can remember with my parents, there'd be this tension that would arise, and all the kids knew it. Like you knew that something wasn't okay. And then they would disappear down to my dad's office, and there'd be sometimes there'd be a lot of shouting, not all the time, but sometimes there'd be shouting on both sides. And then after a long period of time, they'd eventually come back up and everything was like, okay. And so that was my model for how we handle conflict. Like you avoid it for a long time, let the tension build, eventually it explodes, and then something magical happens and they come back up and everything's okay. And I don't know about for you, but that wasn't, I don't know how it was modeled for you, but that was my idea of how to handle conflict. And so when I was doing similar things in front of my children, I didn't feel proud. And I was like, if they're not going to learn it from me, how are they going to learn it? And where are they going to learn it? And it really brought Jamin and I to this point of we can't keep doing what we're doing. I mean, it's one thing for us to struggle through our trauma and our triggers and how it shows up. It's another thing for it to have a generational impact in not a positive way. So we knew that something really had to shift. And even though we had these tools, they weren't working. Like we kept trying. It wasn't like we weren't trying. I've been a relationship coach for a long time. It's one thing to like know something. It's another thing to know how to use it. So we had this plan of like, we're just going to really start like digesting the tools. And so I knew some of the best tools in the industry. And sometimes it's hard to know. Like there are so many tools out there, so many resources out there, so many amazing coaches and therapists. And like, how do you know which ones will really work? And I knew I had like a top 3 of like, these are going to help us navigate our how we're listening to each other and how we're handling this conflict. So we started, learning more about them. But the problem is they weren't working because we were just learning. We were putting it into our brains, but we weren't necessarily integrating it into our systems and into our family culture, into our couple culture. And it's like, just because you know something up here doesn't mean it's going to have an impact out here, or it's going to be available to you when you actually need it. If you don't practice it, it's not going to be there when you actually need it. You have to go through this awkward phase, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But you have to go through this awkward phase of learning the skill. So we had to do just that. And let me tell you, I remember when Jamin and I we decided, okay, this is the tool we're going to use. It was well researched. We knew it had decades of transformative evidence. We knew that it worked with people across cultures, across the world. And like, okay, we're going to use this. And we had learned about it. And I kept trying to use it with him. And I remember him commenting, "Baby, who talks like this?" And it got to be really frustrating because I felt like we were trying to do this thing to change, but it wasn't enough just to keep learning. So yeah, at one point in time, we'd been practicing this, or practicing. We weren't practicing. We were learning about this for a while, and together. So I felt like we were on a mission, but he just wasn't saying the words and when we needed to. And at one point, he was traveling back to visit me. He was on speaking tour and he was coming back home to see me. He was calling me from Vegas. And whatever was going on between us, I was having a hard day. I was having some big emotions. And I really wanted to connect with him. And I started sharing something and he got a little bit triggered, and then I got a little bit triggered. And then next thing you know, both of our walls are up and our defenses are on. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And I felt this pit in my stomach, and I felt myself closing off, and I could hear it in his voice. He was getting walled off. And then the most amazing thing happened. He made a decision to use the tool we'd been learning about. And in that moment, everything shifted. It was like he said the words, and everything in me melted, and I opened back up and was able to be vulnerable, and was able to have so much spaciousness, and was able to also have spaciousness for him. And what historically would have been hours of disconnect, I'm coming back home, and then I'm cold when I see him at the door, and it'd be kind of grumpy between each other for maybe a couple hours, maybe a couple days, and extreme times, maybe a couple weeks, and this could have happened again. But instead, we moved from this pattern that was holding us apart into this practice that really, really worked. And so after all these years, 20 plus years of learning about relationships, of lots of bumps and bruises, and being in this incredible marriage, I made a huge discovery that really was important for us. And that was that you really need to relearn love. We all learned love somewhere. We all learned it before the age of 7. So we learned it probably from our parents and caregivers, from our schools, from our communities, from our religious groups. We all learned these different ideas of how to love. We also learned how to be in our emotions or not be in our emotions. We learned how to handle conflict or not handle conflict. And all of this came with us, but we oftentimes accept it as reality of this is how we do things, instead of thinking, oh, I learned how to do it this way, and maybe it's not an efficient model. Maybe it doesn't serve me anymore. And maybe it's time to learn something new. So when Jamin and I took the time to really relearn how we were loving, how we were handling our traumas, how we were handling our triggers, it was a very different ballgame, especially coming together as a couple to do this. So, if you've been struggling, then I have a question to ask you. Where did you learn about big emotions and handling conflict? So you can unmute yourself, you can type in the chat, but take a moment to think about it. Where did you learn about emotions, your emotions, and how you handle conflict? Maybe they're 2 different places, but I'm curious to know from everybody who's tuning in, what were your big influences? Are the parents? Was it a scene from a movie you're thinking about? Parents, yeah. Parents. Parents are usually the main influence. Yeah. And on a scale of your mother who had 5 husbands, I'm guessing not all at once, but who knows? And on a scale of more parents and siblings, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like they were the model example, like I totally want to do everything they did around how they handled their emotions and how they handled conflict, and 0 being like opposite. I want to be opposite of what they taught me. Where do you fall? Would you give them like a 10? Like, yeah, this was the perfect way to handle my emotions and conflict? Or is it like, no, that was really terrible, 0? Go ahead and drop a number in the chat. 0 to 10. 2. What else? Zeros. Oh, we got a 7 and a 4. Another 3 or 4. A 6. Cool. So kind of all over the board, but nobody's a 10. Because there's always, I mean, to be very clear, your parents and caregivers did the best they could with the resources they had and the time they were in and what was going on in their lives. I firmly believe that. And there's still so much that we have learned and so much that we can do differently if we choose to, and learning about how our emotions show up and how we're with them and how we handle our triggers and our traumas. I'm going to quickly define trauma because I'll use that word a lot today. So trauma could be trauma with a capital T, which is the totally not okay, violence, abuse, not okay. Trauma with a lowercase t is what happened to all of us, for sure. So trauma with a little t example might be you were laying in your bed crying. Your mother came towards you to pick you up, but then the doorbell rang and she decided to get the door first and then come get you. And you just saw her walking away from you in your moment of need and you didn't know what to do. And you didn't have the resources to be with all of that. And that caused this moment of trauma for you. And when that happens, we start to develop our protective, our survival selves. These are all these survival strategies that come online to help us set this intention that we're never going to feel hurt again. And oftentimes they're helpful for us as children when we don't have the cognitive abilities, the developmental skills, or the powers as an adult yet to handle life around us. But they usually screw us over later on in life because they don't serve us anymore and they hold us back from the connections that we actually need and desire. And so we have to undo this learning. We have to undo these survival strategies so we can come into our best self. Like, how do you get to be your best self, especially in partnership? Did you know that there are 3 phases to every relationship? I don't think most people think about it this way, but there are. So there's harmony, disharmony, and repair. So I know people have this idea they want to be in harmony, and yet we as humans love to be uncomfortable or love to be comfortable in our discomfort. So growing up, we learned certain emotions that were very comfortable for us. And a lot of those are loneliness. I'm not saying that's how we want to be. It's that we're used to these emotions. Loneliness, frustration, anger, separation. So feeling sadness, shame, guilt, fear, all of these are commonly exercised emotions that we're more used to experiencing than true happiness and peace and bliss. And so while we have this dream of being in harmony with our partner, in reality, our system is more used to just being in the disharmony. So oftentimes what happens with couples, I see this a lot in my coaching practice, is one couple will be, everything will be fine. It feels peaceful. Things are going along just fine. And then something happens. Maybe it's the way, maybe it's the tone of voice he used, or the way she didn't respond quickly, or the look in their eyes, or, it could be, or the way they touched you. And it's so many different options, but something happened and you get triggered You get thrown off, you get flooded with emotions, and something isn't right. And now you're feeling this disharmony coming on. And most people can feel when the disharmony is coming, like, oh man, it's here. The couples that I see who have the healthiest health and happiness, long-term success are those that can spot the disharmony when it's coming early. And then they don't stay in the disharmony for long. They choose very consciously to move into a state of repair. And in the repair, they have the tools that actually work so that they can then move back into harmony. And once they're in harmony, they stay there as long as possible by celebrating it, by practicing those emotions, by feeling happy, by feeling the peace, by celebrating together. And then again, at some point in time, disharmony is going to happen. It's inevitable. And they know how to spot the signs and what to do with it. So they keep moving through the cycle quickly, staying in harmony as long as possible. Make sense? Drop a 1 in the chat if this is making sense. Drop a 1 in the chat. Awesome. Okay, so I'm curious to know more about you. What does it feel like when you get triggered? What does it feel like? Maybe what does it feel like in your body? What emotions come up? You can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat. What does it feel like to you when you get triggered? The walls are caving in. It's overwhelming. Feel angry. Let's receive a breath. This is a lot. Go ahead and take a deep breath in and we'll let go with a sigh. You get impatient, angry, scared, worthless. Your heart closes up. Sometimes you feel, it's rare, but when it does happen, you feel a little out of control, tense, and you close up. You need to escape. Yeah. There are 4 really common trauma responses. You've probably heard of at least 3 of them. There's fight, where something in your system just like, oh, I need to like go at this person. Flight, where you just feel like you need to escape. You need to get away. You can't stay in this place. Freeze, where you just feel like you're frozen. Maybe you are physically frozen. Maybe your brain just kind of goes blank, or has like one line on repeat. That's called stonewalling. Or the final way is fawning or fixing. This is when you move into people pleasing as a way to get out of the situation. So you're like, oh, let me just get this person to feel better so that this problem goes away. So I'm curious for you, what is your main way? And you can have lots of different responses, but what is your most common way with your current relationship? If you're in a partnership, what is your most current way of responding to this, to trauma coming up? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Fight. Fight. Freeze. Freeze. Fight. Yeah, a freezer and flight or fight. 50-50. Cool. Yeah, so it's a big mix. For me, my combination is, well, I'd say Jamin's is probably more around fighting. And mine, it is fawning. Yeah, his would be fighting or fawning, and mine would be fleeing or fawning most of the time, which is very interesting for our dynamic. And we all have it, right? Everyone around the whole world has these responses. So it's not something we can't learn about, and that hasn't been studied. And it's really interesting. The more we open ourselves and our awareness, like, what is your style? What is my style? What is our pattern? Because we have a pattern. Trust me, you are always training your partner, and your partner is always training you. You co-created what you have right now. And so if you want to undo the messiness, you have to start to look at what is your part. What can you take ownership of? And how can you really start to be with this? Yes, Bonnie is trying to fix it by people pleasing. Thank you for sharing that. And again, all right. So let's take a look at a very brief look. And one of my other classes, in my Relearn Love class that I teach here in Bali, often I lead people through a guided visual around your trigger origins. I just want you to pause for a moment and think about, where did you first start feeling like you needed to protect yourself? Who do you get triggered by? Or do you think it's probably one of your parents? So which parent is more triggering for you? And are there certain things about what they do that really drive you crazy, that 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 make you want to run or freeze or fight or try to fix something? And just tuning in to your own past. And noticing what's coming up for you. Whatever it is exactly as it should be, even if it's hard. And just taking a moment to become aware and be curious. Is there anything that my partner does that reminds me of my parents in any way? Almost all of our triggers come from when we were younger. And we don't even know all of like where they came from or what they are. So, I've been a coach for a couple decades now, and my husband and I still work with a therapist and a coach, because you can't know what's going on when you're in it so deeply. And there's always more to learn. And there are things that people, especially trained professionals, coaches or therapists, can see that you can't see because you're in it. And I remember even just a couple months ago, we were on a call with our therapist, and we were having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden something happened, and Jamin got triggered and I got triggered right off of him, and we were like in this space, and I didn't know what it was, but she caught it. She caught it right away, and she's like, "Hey, Jamin, you just did this thing with your eye." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never knew what that was." And I was like, "My dad did something very similar." So my nervous system was able to pick up on this thing that was triggering me well before my brain or emotions could catch up to it. It was just like, boom, this is happening. You're not safe. And that's not necessarily true. That's an old story. It's an old pattern. And so what we want to do is be really curious about what is old and what is current, and what can we do in the current place with these triggers. So let's go ahead and receive another breath. Shake it out a little bit. Whoo. Got lots to share today, and I'm so excited we get to dive into all this. Take care of yourself, drink water. If you need to use the restroom, go for it. We're going to keep going, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about the sandbox if you haven't heard about it before. The idea of the sandbox is that imagine that there's a bench over here, and that when you are in your best self, sometimes we call it the healthy self. We're going to call it your best self. When you're your best self, you and your partner get to sit on the bench, and you're in this calm, cool place. And then something happens. Again, it could be the way their tone of voice, the way they look at you, the way they touch you, like something happens. And one of you gets triggered. And when you get triggered, it's like you're getting off of the bench, and you climb into the sandbox. And the sandbox is where you go into your inner child, and you go into that trauma response, and you're doing the fight, flight, freezing, and fawning, and you're freaking out. And what would ideally happen is that your partner would stay on the bench. If you're in the sandbox, your partner would stay in the bench, and they would love you in that place of having this freak out, and you would know how to have a freak out without hurting them. But what often happens is that when you're in the sandbox, you're having a really rough time. You don't know how to not make it blaming, shaming, gaslighting, and hurting your partner. And at the same time, your partner is taking everything personally, even if you're not doing those things. Even if you're just having your own response, they might be taking it really personally and making it about them. So then they get triggered, and they get off of the bench, and they also jump in the sandbox. So now there's two hurt inner children in a trauma response freaking out, and there's no adult supervision. And this is where so much of the conflict comes from, and so much of the disharmony comes from. So what I teach people to do in my private coaching program is I really teach them that it's okay to be in the sandbox. But what we want to do is we want to consciously choose to go in the sandbox and the other partner choose to stay on the bench and hold space and be there, and to learn how to do that in a way that really works and will help you both take turns. You can take turns in the sandbox. It sounds like a challenging thing to learn, but it's not that. It is challenging. And once you learn it, it's like your whole life will change. Your whole life will change, and you will no longer feel like you're completely controlled by your trauma responses. So I'm going to give you guys a couple different tools you can take home today and start using. The first one is creating a secret signal. So my first invitation to you is to start thinking about, how do you know when there's that disharmony coming on? How do you know when you're getting triggered? And just ask that, maybe write that question down for yourself. How do I know when I'm getting triggered? And how do I know when my partner is getting triggered? And talk about this. What are the signs? How do we know that the train is coming and it's about to derail? And then talk about, like, how can we signal each other this is happening before it actually happens? Sometimes you'll be able to, sometimes you won't. But maybe it's a timeout sign. Maybe it's a touch your nose sign. Maybe it's a wiggling your ear sign. But choosing some sort of signal, it's like, whoa, I am jumping in the sandbox and I need to do something about it. So first of all, have a way to let each other know that this is happening, that one of you is going in the sandbox. And again, these are going to be some high level tools that'll at least get you started. And these are things that I go really deep into with my clients in a private coaching program. So if you want to know more, we can always chat about it. And just know that you have permission to pause. Permission to pause. Like, so many people feel like when the conflict arises, they have to solve it right now. When the trauma arises, you have to solve it right now. But you're in a trauma response, and that takes time and patience and nervous system rewiring, because most of the time your nervous system is remembering something that happened to you long ago and is responding to that at the same time in real life. And so what we want to do is be with each other in that space and learn how to take this mess and make it our medicine, make it the healing for us, make it the healing for our relationship, and really start to have more compassion for each other's inner childs that probably wasn't modeled the best way of handling their emotions when they're younger. There's a really great acronym used by 12-step groups that I love called HALT. You want to write this down. HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely or loaded, and tired. I'll walk through those again. But if you give yourself permission to pause, remember you signaled that you're going into the sandbox, you're getting triggered, this, whatever your signal is that you created. Now you're going to take a little bit of space to just check in with yourself first, because your relationship with yourself is so crucial before you can come back into a relationship with another human. So looking at, okay, let's ask myself these 4 questions. Am I hungry? Because a lot of times we pick fights when we have low blood sugar. If I'm hungry, I need to go have a quick snack. Am I angry? Angry doesn't have to be just angry, but it could be any big emotion. So did something happen earlier in the day that maybe has you feeling like, oh my gosh, I am coming into this, like maybe I had a fight with a coworker and I'm already coming in with that tension, or my cat got sick and now I am coming in with that sadness, right? So is there something that I'm coming to my partner with already that I maybe haven't voiced yet or not even aware of the impact it's having on me? Stress causes a lot of conflict in other ways for people. Lonely or loaded. Lonely is, you think about kids when they're little and they feel lonely. What do? They throw a tantrum so they can get attention. They want that hug. They want to be seen. They want to be seen, heard, and loved. And they throw tantrums most of the time when they're younger to get people's attention, to get the things they need. And we as adults, we're just kids in big bodies. And this is our way of throwing tantrums a lot of times. When we feel lonely, when we feel like we need to be seen, heard, and loved, we'll pick a fight because then at least we get attention, even if it's negative attention. Loaded is don't try to handle conflict if you've had any alcohol or drugs. It doesn't work. Be sober before you approach this conflict. And T is tired. Did you get enough sleep? Are you just exhausted? Because a lot of people pick fights or feel more triggered more easily when they're exhausted. So if that's you, go take a power nap and then come back into this conversation from a more grounded and centered place. So you get to own this. You get to own your response when you feel it coming on. It doesn't have to be solved immediately, but there needs to be some agreement of, okay, when we do the signal, we're going to take 20 minutes apart, do our halt check-in for ourselves, and then we're going to come back together and check in and talk. And there's so much more around this, I believe, in chapter 5 of my book, Relationship Agreements, if you want to go deeper in a more like, let's read it or listen to it on an audible way. And there's one other tool that I love in this time out, in this time of checking in with yourself, which is to shake. It sounds kind of funny, but our bodies hold trauma. They hold old trauma too. There are things that you probably didn't know how to process or how to let go of from much earlier in your life that your body is still holding on to, and your body remembers. And so when things come up and you're feeling that tension, the energy needs to go somewhere. And instead of it becoming a yelling or a running or a freezing and just getting caught inside or becoming a nervous energy of fixing, instead of that, what would it be like to intentionally direct some of it out? And so one of the best ways to do so is just to shake. And you can lay down and shake. You can stand up, put your feet hips width apart and just bounce up and down and shake your arms, shake your face. Go ahead and try it if you're at home and you want to, or you can try it later, but just try just shaking a little bit and breathing at the same time. Let's do another inhale while you're shaking. Deep breath in and shake it out. And if you're not feeling courageous enough to do this on camera, no worries, but really do try it later on. It can be one of the most incredible tools. And if you're out in public, you can go to a bathroom stall and do this quietly, and it works there too. It's one of the most amazing things we've taught our children for how they can handle getting things moving through their system. I want to teach you one more big tool. Everybody okay with that? Drop a 1 if you're still with me and you want to learn one more tool that will help you. Drop a 1 if you're still with me and you want to learn one more tool. Not overwhelmed? Great. Cool. Yay. Let's do it then. I want to teach you one more tool that I absolutely love, called the feedback wheel. This one you're going to want to make sure you screenshot and save or write down the steps. It's really going to make a big difference in your life and in your relationship with your partner and with your kids and your friends and your parents. So before I tell you the steps of the feedback wheel are, first of all, the feedback wheel is not mine. It's by one of my, like who I want to be when I grow up. You know, we've all got those role models. One of them is Terry Real for me, and I just love his work. He's an incredible researcher and psychologist. But there are some things you need to do to get ready to do the feedback wheel. When Jamin and I have conflict or when we're triggered, we do all the things I just invited you to do. And then we also move into the feedback wheel. And the first thing I do is I invite him in. I don't just start throwing at him. We want to feel invited. We really want to feel seen and heard and loved. And one of the ways we feel seen and heard is if we're considered. So first I invite him in. Hey, babe, would you be open to doing a feedback wheel with me? And if he says yes, then great. And if he says no, then I honor that. And we find a time that maybe will be better. Okay, what about tonight after dinner? Okay, what about tomorrow morning before you go to work? Or after the kids go to bed? You're like, what is it that's going to work for you? But finding a time. And one of the things I love about the feedback wheel is it is meant to be short and sweet. Many tools that I see, and some of them I really love, but they can take a lot longer. And the feedback wheel is meant to be done in 4 to 8 sentences. So it's short and sweet, and it doesn't have to mean you block an hour every time you have something come up. And you just need to, I invite you to remember that your goal is to improve your connection. It's not to be right. I heard somebody say, you can be right or you can be married. It's not quite that extreme, but it's not about winning some sort of argument. It's really about coming back into connection and understanding your partner more and having them understand you more, because you're very different creatures. very different creatures. And you've had different life experiences, and you've created different stories and different meanings through your life. And so coming into this with the objective of coming back into connection is going to be so helpful for you. And make sure that you are actually ready to do this 4-step process too. It's not like, okay, I'm going to have to do it. It's like, am I ready to do it? Am I ready to be present? Am I ready to, if I'm going to be listening, am I ready to put on this little protective bubble of not taking it personally, but really hearing my partner and not making it about me? And if I'm going to be sharing, it's also a lot about letting go and accepting that I can't control whatever the outcome is going to be, but I can speak from my best self as much as I can and from my vulnerable self and see what happens and how we can come back into connection. So here's the 4 steps. First one is you're going to share the objective truth. Like, what happened? If there was a video, like a security camera taping what just happened between you both, what would that be? So without putting your story or your spin on it or what it means to you on it, just simply, you walked in the house at 7:20, you went to, when you said to be home at 7 o'clock, you went into your room and you slammed the door on your way in, or whatever it was that happened. But objectively, this is what happened. Step number 2 is, what is the story that you made up about this? What is the meaning that you're assigning? Because your brain is creating some sort of meaning out of what just happened. So it could have been like, and the meaning I'm making out of this is that you are avoiding me and you're really mad at me and I did something wrong. Step number 3 is, what are you feeling? What are the experience? So when that happened, I felt, and you don't have to go into a lot, just name the emotions. I felt sad, not good enough, scared, small. If you can name the experience in your body too, that helps a lot. My throat closed up, my stomach got in knots. I felt exhausted all of a sudden. And step 4 is, what do you need? What would you love for your partner to do to help you with this repair? Maybe it's, hey, I would love to be curious about what was going on for you. Or I would really appreciate a hug right now. Or could you just hold me for a few minutes? Ideally, it's something that you can do in real time. So it's not like, promise you'll never slam the door again. And that can be an agreement you guys come to at some point in time, but try to soothe your nervous system now with something that you can change right now. Does that make sense? And it might be also asking for a phrase. And it might be saying, can you tell me that I didn't do anything wrong? Can you tell me that it's not my fault? Because we all have core wounds. All of us have core wounds. Core wounds are these deep, painful stories that we carry with us and have since childhood. And there's like 7 major core wounds around the world that everyone has at least one. And the top 2 that I see in my practice are, I'm not good enough and I'm going to be abandoned. So if these are this underlying painful story that are with us all the time, they're shaping our life all the time. They're shaping the way that we see our partner and see the world. So if my core wound is I'm not good enough, then even if my husband coming home late and slamming the door had 0 things to do with me, maybe he just had a bad day, or he has got a headache, or something happened on the way home and he's just like needs to lay down and decompress, and that's why he's late. It's like, even if it had nothing to do with me, because of my core wound, I'm taking all this on and I'm making it about I'm not good enough. We all have something like this. If I do something, there is like a 99% chance that it is going to loop back when we get to the heart of things to my husband's core wound, which is more around he's not considered. He's not considered. So this is so important to recognize that this feedback wheel can really help you both come into connection. And you don't have to fix anything. You don't have to make grand new plans. And you don't have to let this conversation go on for an hour. You might decide to spend more time on it later on, but give it some space. And maybe you need to flip roles and say, okay, thank you for sharing all that. I would also like to do a feedback wheel on my side, right? And move that into that space together. But don't move into that space until after the first person feels like they have received what they need from their partner to do repair, if their partner is open to it. Make sense? Drop a 1 in the chat if you are following along with the feedback wheel. Woohoo! Thanks, everybody. Glad you're here with me. All right, let's receive a breath before I ask you a question. Go ahead and receive a breath. Oh, we will do questions at the end. If you can save them, that'd be wonderful. Just write down your question. We'll come back to it. All right, deep breath in and exhale. All right, so let me ask you a question. I love this picture. So we just covered so much. We just covered so much in a very short time. In 50 minutes, we packed in things I would lead people through in a much longer workshop. And you guys are amazing. So thanks for hanging in there and drinking from this fire hose. It feels like sometimes of here's a lot of information. Take in what you can. So taking all this in, let's take one more breath. Learned a lot about trauma and triggers and trauma responses and how we show up and what it means and what we can take ownership of and how to do the feedback wheel and like how we respond in a sandbox. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so what I want to do is also simplify this a little bit more instead of just saying, okay, here you go, good luck. And for some of you, like this is going to be enough. You're like, okay, I learned so much from this masterclass. I'm going to take this with me and run with it. I'm good to go, Ari. And in your case, great. I am cheerleading you. You got this. And I'm just in full support and celebrating you. And for some other people, you're like, all right, this is all really nice, but how the heck do I actually implement it into my relationship, into my life? How do I stay accountable to actually following through on this and see the things I can't see? So I want to say that I want to extend an invitation to all of you that you're invited to my one-on-one Relearn Love coaching program. And if you're okay with it, I would love to tell you, I'll spend maybe 5 minutes-ish and tell you about the program. So if you're open to me sharing about the program, drop a 1 in the chat. We'll spend a few minutes and then we'll move into Q&A and get to all of your questions. It's okay? Drop a 1 if you're okay with me sharing. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. All right, well then with your consent, let me tell you a little bit about my one-on-one program. This is a really amazing program I've been running for many years, and I very intentionally only work with a handful of couples at a time. I also have a singles program, but today this is really designed for couples, and so I want to talk about that. I only work with a handful of couples at a time because it's a very high touch experience, whereas working with a therapist is usually you go in for one session and then you won't see them again until you decide to schedule another session. This is very much a container that we create together where I get to be your witness, be your cheerleader, be your guide, and be there the whole time. So in between sessions, we're in connection via WhatsApp support individually and as a couple. And so you can get a lot of additional coaching. In the sessions, they're custom designed to help you where you're at. So each journey is unique. And then I also send you on designer dates, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But really, this program is for anyone who's in a committed relationship and wants deeper intimacy, which I think most of us really desire more of that. Or you wouldn't be on this call because this is very much for people who are like, okay, I want more. Yep. Like it's good or it's not good and I want more. And so it doesn't matter how long you've been together, whether it's been 9 months or 7 years or 50 years. I know we've got a 30-year in here at least. So however long it's been that you've been together, this is for anyone who's shared life's journeys enough to know that your partner has some quirks and you're ready to take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. I've worked with a lot of couples around the world, hundreds at this point, and this is a beautiful quote from a friend now and client of mine who's in Colorado. I love how Carly said, I truly feel like we have a tool belt full of marriage equipment ready for us to strap on and make an incredible life together for us and in the future for our children. Actually, they just had a baby, so that's pretty exciting. And they're now using these tools with their baby already. Thank you. This program didn't just impact this generation, but it impacted several generations to come. And I really encourage people to think about how you choose to invest in yourself and in your relationship with the divorce rate over 50% in the USA and the average cost of divorce being at almost $23,000 on average, it's wild. And I see people make up a lot of different stories around why they don't want to get support. And whether it's with me or somebody else, I really encourage you to get professional support. We all need it. Even a relationship coach needs it. Even relationship therapists need it. There's just so much we can't see on our own. And there's so much that's been researched out there that we know works, that once you learn how to integrate it into your life, and once you relearn how to love, it's a game changer. Now, I laugh because, if somebody wants to learn tennis and they say, oh, I'm hiring a tennis coach, you're like, oh, that's awesome. If somebody's starting a new business, like, I hired a business coach, we're like, of course you did. That's great. You're going to get where you want to go so much faster. Then if you say, oh, I hired a therapist or a relationship coach, people are like, oh, I'm so sorry. Something must be really screwed up. It's like, there is so much cultural shame on this thing that we're supposed to naturally be good at. We're supposed to just know how to fight. We're supposed to just know what to do with our emotions. And yet, we didn't have that modeled. We all saw in the beginning, like, whose parents really modeled that perfectly? No parents modeled that perfectly. So there's so much to learn. And I'm going to invite you to pause for just a moment here and think about the healthy, long-term, happy couples you know. However you want to define that. Healthy, happy, long-term couples. I want you to count how many couples you know. Okay. Now I want you to drop a number in the chat. Is it more than 10? Is it more than 5? Is it 3, 2, 1, 0? How many healthy, happy, long-term couples do you know? 10? Amazing. 0, 3. Yeah. I asked this question in all of my Really in Love classes, which I have people from all around the world every week, and 3 and 5. And it doesn't matter where people are at and globally, the average is somewhere around 3. It's incredible to me that we're supposed to be good at this thing that yet we don't have any real models for, and that people have so much shame and guilt and fear of exploring and investing in. And I just want to say that I've been through this. I have over 2 decades of personal experience with relationships. I need to update this because it's now been 9 years and 8 weddings. Oh no, we just had our 7th wedding. No, 8th. We just had our 8th wedding. Oh my gosh. About 2 weeks ago, we got married again. My background is in sexual psychology, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of couples and singles around the world to help with self-help things, communication. And I've done so much of my own research and so much of my own coaching. And I've spent well over $200,000 on coaching and being coached by world-renowned therapists and coaches and all sorts of somatic practitioners so that I can bring this into my practice and give you the best of the best. Like, you don't have to go through all that. You don't have to do all the things I did. You can just have the best of what I learned in one quick swoop. And then I also get to be your I like to call it a dating dominatrix because I've designed these amazing dates for couples to go on. There's these experiences that take you out of your norm because there's something powerful about mystery and about playfulness that couples lose over time. And when we get stuck in the everyday, that's when there's more, it's more likely that we're going to have more tension, more conflict. If we're not finding fun ways to connect, if we're not being surprised by our partner, or surprising ourselves and what we can do when we break out of our usual patterns. So this is what I do with couples. I lead them on these dates and I say, okay, partner A, you're in charge of the date this week. Here's your written instructions, your video instructions, and I'm here on WhatsApp if you need support. Partner B, you are surrendering to the experience. Enjoy the ride. And then the following week, we'll switch roles. And it's really powerful to watch what happens when people's when people start exploring together again and having fun and having more laughter, and how much you can learn tools on these dates that will help you navigate your conflict. It will help you navigate the triggers because you have new ways that you're learning together of how to love and how to be in connection. They're just super powerful, and they can be really fun to learn too. One of my other clients, Steve, I just got to meet him and his wife and their beautiful child earlier this year when I was on my speaking tour. And he sent me this before we met. He said, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you. I'm so very grateful for you and for what you've been in my life. I'm blown away that somebody I've never met in person, now we have, high-fived or hugged has had such a personal, intimate, and profound impact on my life. I'm very grateful to have you and for the impact you've had on my life and our lives and us as a couple. I see the evidence of your impact, and I know that we are now capable of handling anything that comes our way. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for all the things. That's from Steve and me. They are in Las Vegas. So my invitation to you is to just take a moment to imagine that you've taken this journey. You've decided to relearn love. And not just the few things that I touched on today, but you've really decided to go on this journey. The journey together is 4 months long. And at the end, my intention is you don't need me anymore. You have a solid foundation to navigate anything that comes your way. You may choose to want me and want to go deeper. I have worked with some couples for long periods of time. We just celebrated an 8-year anniversary with one couple who's now becoming relationship coaches. 3 couples I've worked with have gone on to become relationship coaches. And so there's always so much more to explore. You never know what's possible. But taking a moment to imagine that you've gone through your own journey and you two have decided to relearn love together. So instead of walking on eggshells, you're feeling fully expressed with your partner. And you can relax and know that you can trust and love and that you did all the work to be here. And you're having fun and feeling connected like you've always wanted. And that other couples will notice you and start asking you how you did it. So you can have a bigger ripple effect in your community and your family. And this just goes out more and more. And that you're not being so heavily influenced by these triggers and by your traumas, but instead you know how to turn them into the medicine and into the healing for each other so you can move forward. And through this process, you get to feel re-energized by your love, motivating you to be more successful in your career, embrace your health, your wellness. You can be more fully you because your partner will appreciate you for who you are and what you want. And they're going to want to bring out more of you every day. And you get to tap back into the joy and love you first felt when you were newly in love, when you were in that new relationship energy. And you can feel like teammates again. And maybe if you're already feeling like teammates, you'll go even deeper and you'll be like, wow, we discovered so much more that we didn't even know was possible. So now you have a choice. You can take what you learned today from this masterclass and apply it to your own life, which is great. I encourage everyone to do that. Please take whatever it landed for you and go start implementing it and let me know how it goes. I love to hear. You can send me an email or a WhatsApp or Instagram message and just let me know, like, how is the journey going? Or you can choose to invest in your relationship and learn exactly how to become better teammates by relearning love. And I will give you the step-by-step process all the way through, and I'll hold your hand and I'll guide you and I'll celebrate you along the way. And I'll kick your butt when you need a little butt kicking. And I'll be here when you need that support and that other voice that can celebrate and hold the relationship in a really sacred and special place, and not just one person or the other, but can see all 3 entities, you, your partner, and the relationship. So what happens next? We're going to be closing up this masterclass and moving into Q&A. But if you are like, yeah, Ari, this sounds awesome. Again, you can message me on email. You can message me on Instagram. You can also go to this link right here. I'll drop it in the chat. And this is for an application. If you want to apply to be in the Relearn Love program, I am accepting. We have 1 opening right now. So if you're interested, please let me know and we can hop on a call either with me or one of my teammates and just talk about what's going on for you and where you're feeling stuck and where you're feeling all those triggers coming up that just feel so like they're influencing your relationship in a really negative way. And you're ready to stop that pattern and move into a new practice. And with that, thank you all for taking the time to join me for today's call, for listening to learn about my program and what it's like to work with me. And as we if you want to know more, we'll hop on the call first and we'll talk about all sorts of details and how that would look. Cool? All right. And with that, I'm going to pause us here and end the recording, and we'll do Q&A so you can come on screen and share whatever you have, okay? Stop this. 1 moment.